In Germany, everything seems to be dubbed. But why is that? Originally, films did not have to be dubbed, they were silent films. French films were also shown in the USA, and the German actor Emil Jannings received the first Oscar for Best Male Actor. The first films to be dubbed was a British film Black Male by Alfred Hitchcock. He was started as a silent film but then continued as a sound film. This meant that the first scenes had to be dubbed.
Anyway. What a chance for blackmail.
Until 1933, films were also dubbed for the international market in Hollywood. Laurel and Hardy, for example, shot the same film several times and then read foreign language texts from a blackboard that were written in phonetic transcription.
Na, du hast da ja wieder schön was angerichtet.
Wieso ich? Stanley Laurel.
In typical dubbing productions at the time, foreign language speakers were also in Hollywood and dubbed the films directly there for the European market. Paramount began in the early 1930s with dubbing studios in France and then Berlin. While either German or synchronized Hollywood films were shown in Germany at this time, German cinema also opened up to the European market after the Second World War, and films from France, Great Britain and Italy, for example, were shown. In the GDR, films from what was then Czechoslovakia, Poland or Soviet Union were shown. In Germany, however, people on both sides of the Iron Curtain mainly spoke German. In order to make it easier for the viewers to understand, they resorted to dubbing. As Germany is one of the most populous countries in Europe, the market for such films and their dubbing was large enough. With appropriate dubbing, the film could also be shown in Austria, Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, parts of Switzerland and parts of Belgium. Films and series are also typically dubbed in France, and this can then also be used in other French-speaking countries. In other European countries, only children's programs are sometimes dubbed. In Eastern Europe, often only one speaker dubs everything and others only use subtitles. However, just like here on YouTube, you miss a lot of the movie if you have to concentrate to read the subtitles. Every country that shows animated films knows this. The cartoon character needs a voice. But with real actors, we actually have the voice, just not the right language. For example, the film Das Boot was shot without original sound because the ambient noise on set and the cramped space made it impossible and had to be completely dubbed for the production country Germany. Even for the English-speaking market, the original actors spoke their lines in English.
Weiter, geht schon.
Beide machen, dass euch das Wasser im Arsch kocht! Das sind gleich wie der Hase läuft, das ist Alarm! Ihr seid ja nicht auf der Vergnügungsabfahrt!
Achtung, komm auf und 10.
April, April. Übung ist das halbe Leben.
So Hitler Youth Leader might put a record on for us?
The Tipperary song, if you have no objections.
one short little Tommy record won't change you into the King of England.
So, if we disregard the fact that the ambient noise ruins the sound recording, how does this synchronization actually works? Nowadays, dubbing is usually made easier at the production stage. For example, a soundtrack is supplied that contains as little of the original language as possible. So if you're watching a dialogue on TV and the TV program should actually be heard in the background, this is often removed in the new film. Often important written texts are also removed so that you can insert them in the respective language. If the film is then to be dubbed, the dialogue book has to be created first. To do this, the people responsible will hopefully watch the movie in the original. Of course, they should understand the language. Then the texts have to be translated. There are a few problems with this. Firstly, the meaning should be retained. However, there are sometimes original texts with a double meaning. Some meanings can only be understood if you know the regional context. But there's another special feature here. In addition to the content, an attempt is made to write texts that are as lip-synchronous as possible. For the English-speaking command, attention! The German command would be stillgestanden. But the mouse position for A is completely different to that for an S. So, in Germany, you switch to Abteilung stillgestanden or alles stillgestanden. And then you have to speak a little fast at the end. I found the translation of a scene from the movie V for Vendetta very irritating. At the end, there's a scene in a subway station where the bad guy says, "We have guns." That's right, the helpers have pistols. With them, guns are firearms in general.
Nothing but your bloody knives and your fancy karate gimmicks. We have guns.
In the German translation he says, "Wir haben Gewehre." That may fit with the mouse position, but rifles, Gewehre, are long guns and they had pistols.
Sie haben gar nichts, überhaupt nichts, außer ihren bescheuerten Messern und ihren affigen Karate-Zappeleien. Wir haben Gewehre.
Nein, sie haben Kugeln und die Hoffnung, dass ich nicht mehr stehe, wenn ihre Munition aufgebraucht ist.
Perhaps "Wir haben Knarren" would have been a better translation. A pistol is also colloquially called a Knarre, what means also a ratchet. Once you have the book, it is time to start planning. When should it be made? Which voice actors are needed? How long do you need the speakers? Can you perhaps manage to have the voice actors there only certain days so that they are there for as short time as possible to save costs and at the same time they are together and have the dialogue? In Germany, people always try to assign the same voice actor for foreign actors. As a result, a whole series of different actors in Germany have the same voice. Listen to this.
Begeistert sein, Doug. Ich möchte wissen, wie echt das wird.
Ach, komm schon, bald wirst du froh sein, mich nicht mehr zu sehen und ein bisschen Zeit für dich zu haben. Du wirst sagen, ach bitte, lass mich in Ruhe, lass mich in Ruhe.
Nein.
Doch, doch, ich weiß es.
Möchten Sie die Zukunft kennen?
Wie wär's mit der Vergangenheit? So wie die Quarter Pounder mit Käse in Paris nennen?
Wie nennen die? Royal mit Käse. Royal mit Käse? Denkt ihr, das hier ist der echte Quaid? Er ist es!
The only deviation from this is if the voice actor is unable to work or has died. This even led to Thomas Dannenberg, who dubbed both Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger, going it for both actors in the same film.
Was macht der denn hier?
Diesen chinesischen Milliardär retten. Ach was, ist ja witzig, wir auch.
When he didn't do that for Escape Plan, it was very confusing for German audience. As far as possible, German-speaking actors naturally dub themselves. Here too, there are only exceptions to this rule. Arnold Schwarzenegger may have been too expensive or didn't want to do it, and Uschi Glas was dubbed in a Winnetou film because she speaks with an audible Bavarian accent, which would have been inappropriate for the portrayal of an Indian woman. For the voice recording, the dubbing actors then go to a studio with soundproof booth and record the individual takes of a maximum of 10 seconds. They watch the scene and then try to lip sync the text as much as possible with the right expression. Typically, the dubbing director is in the next room, giving instructions like a movie director on which emotion or tempo to speak. Around 400 to 450 takes are recorded for a 45-minute series, and as with a movie, some takes have to be repeated several times. Once all the voice recordings have been made, it's time for the sound mix, and then the dubbing actually finished. In addition to the fact that dubbing makes it easier to follow the film, there are also some advantages. In the years after the Second World War, for example, the evil Nazis were replaced by crooks in various films. It was thought that German audience didn't want to hear about Nazis again. Or in Bud Spencer and Terence Hill's film, a very flippant translation with a lot of humor was chosen.
Warum kannst du Pfeife nicht im Sattel sitzen wie ein normaler Mensch?
Mein Gesäß zu schnell mürbe wird. Wo hoppeln wir eigentlich hin?
Nach Norden.
Ist doch viel zu kalt. Warum?
Weil ich es so entschieden habe.
Moment, ich hab doch
Du
wohl
hast
das
überhaupt
Recht.
kein Recht. Du tust, was ich dir sage, oder du kriegst eine gescheuert.
The series The Persuaders, in German Die Zwei, was also a poor success in the UK and not very successful in the USA. It was a big hit in Germany, Austria, France and a few other countries. This was also due to the dubbing, which brought much more wit to the dialogue than in the original, and in France too the dubbing was based on the German text rather than the original.
Ich hoffe, Sie sind mir nicht allzu gram, wenn ich Ihnen mal die Hand drücke, ja? Aber mitten in die Schnauze.
This is largely thanks to Rainer Brandt, an actor, dubbing actor, and then also dubbing director and dialogue book author, who established a dubbing style known as Schnodderdeutsch for such films and series. Some of the dubbing continued when there was no speaker in the picture or they were visible from behind so that you could say what you want without having to pay attention to lip sync.
Wichtig ist nur, dass wir nicht auffallen.
Dafür haben wir den Tarnanzug an.
Im Auge. Und das macht den ja aus, nicht? Und da kannst du alles da rein, bei die zwei, da haben wir ja doch, weiß nicht, 20 Filme immer. Da ist es ja auch, dass du viel im Deutschen dazu gemacht hast, für den Gag einfach. Weil ich hatte freie Hand, da habe ich gesagt, die Leute sollen lachen, weiter nicht.
The dubbing in Ice Age was also so good, which was noticed by the above-average audience figures in Germany, that the makers checked what was the difference. Sid doesn't have a lisp in the first part. That was the idea of the German voice, the comedian Otto Walkes, who was then invited to the USA to show this style to the others. Think about it. Did Sid lisp in your translation? Did he already do that in the first movie? But of course, dubbing also has a few disadvantages or problems. For one thing, it is expensive. If a distributor or TV station wants to show something in Germany, they have to be sure that it will be worthwhile. This can be a disadvantage for smaller, less well-known productions. On the other hand, translation errors can occur, such as the guns and rifles as in V, which is actually correct but inappropriate for the images, or silicone and silicon may mixed up in translations. On the other hand, Anglicism creep in if certain words are not translated, so it is difficult to translate the schools. A high school is not a Hauptschule and not a Hochschule, or the typical swear words are often retained. Sometimes puns are also lost, like here in Spaceballs.
Radar about to be jammed.
Even if different languages such as German are used in a story and therefore people don't understand each other and translators are used, what are they supposed to translate? At the end of Band of Brothers, a general speaks to the German soldiers. An American soldier translates. But what does he do in the German dubbing?
Es war ein langer Krieg. Es war ein harter Krieg.
Liebgar?
Man, it's been a long war. It's been a tough war.
Ihr habt tapfer und stolz für euer Vaterland gekämpft.
You fought bravely, proudly for your country.
Ihr seid eine ganz besondere Truppe.
You are a special group.
Here he makes more or less sarcastic comments. If you don't know the original, this is absolutely understandable. Incidentally, the German viewers notice in the original that the text was not written by a German. The term Foxholes, Fuchslöcher, does not exist in German. It would have been Schützenloch or Schützengraben.
Unter Kameraden,
among brothers,
die Fuchshöhlen geteilt haben.
We've shared foxholes.
Even in Die Hard, the criminals in the German dubbing were only European criminals, some with an Italian accent. We were therefore very surprised that a brother from the former GDR appeared in another part of Die Hard. As a native speaker, you can also hear who of the actors can speak German themselves and who is only trying to do so for the shot.
Links. Rechts und wieder links.
Hey, Bruder.
Moment. Nein, 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 warte doch nicht.
Ich dir gesagt. Was habe ich dir gesagt? Ich will, dass es keiner sieht.
Haltet sie zurück. Ich sage es zum letzten Mal.
Ich weiß nicht, wie ich es erklären soll, aber komm sofort, schnell.
Joanna, hat ein Maschinengewehr.
Haben Sie ihn gefunden?
Karl ist mit mir. Wir sind im Heizehaus unter dem Dach. Im Heizehaus unter dem Dach.
Wo ist Karl?
He's in the elevator shaft. Hast du das gehört?
If you still want to listen to the original, many films and series on public television offer the option of listening to the program in the original, or when it comes to DVD and Blu-ray, they oft have different dubbed versions that you can use. Personally, I like to watch the movie first in the dubbed version and then once in the original. Since you already know what it is about, it's not quite so bad if you do not understand every word. It also seems to me that the conversations are often easier to understand in the dubbed version than in the original, because there's often no background noise. What did a Dutchman tell me, who I always envy for the excellent command of English? When he was young, Dutch programs were boring, and if you wanted to watch something decent, you had to watch English films or German television. And if you didn't want to read subtitles all the time, you had to learn English or German. The Dutchman not only spoke excellent English, but also German. So dubbing in film or series is not a German invention, but actually typical for Hollywood, so that they could sell the films all over the world if possible. And German dubbing studios are very experienced and usually really good at dubbing. Not always, but more and more often. Some of the dubbing actors are also booked for commercials to read out the advertising message in the style of the star that the speaker normally speaks. How do you prefer to watch movies in a language you don't know? Dubbed or with subtitles?
Stefan, was ist? Kommst du mal bitte?
Ja.
Schau dir das an. Von hier haben sie sich abgeseilt. Sind durch den Lichtschacht und unten durch das Toilettenfenster wieder rein.
32 éves volt. A címe Raimondstrasse. Van családja, kell érte.
Vous dire ce qui serait le bienvenu pour nous. Que vous nous disiez ce qui s'est passé exactement dans votre cours. La victime n'était pas connue de nos fichiers.
Il mio angelo custode. Allora, mia cara, io la ringrazio. Grazie ancora di tutto. E guardando le cicatrici penserò a lei.
And if you want to learn the language, you can also watch with subtitles in the language, so you can hear and read the other language. Even if you want to learn German, why not watch a program in German with German subtitles? Until then, thank you for your attention. I'll see you in the next video.